Hey, welcome back to Everyday Economics. This is the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, publisher of the Center Square. Everyday Economics is brought to you by the Center Square. To support Everyday Economics, please make a tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We're recording this episode on Friday, February 14th. It's Valentine's Day, 2025. Joining me, as always, my friend and colleague, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. He's a PhD. Dr. O, every once in a while, the Zillow comes out with something that, makes me go, I like that. It's pretty good. They did that this week, and gosh, they got a lot of run on it. I'm actually reading this report on Forbes. So, good media week for the Zillow.
It's always a good media week at Zillow, man. It's crazy. I mean,
I know. I see you everywhere. Everybody sees you everywhere. Hey, there's Dr. Orphe. He's on whatever. And, I love it when you make the local morning shows in local markets. Those are my favorite because it's like you're up at like 4 o'clock in the morning to talk to somebody in New York or whatever.
Seattle. Yeah. All right. I got all the lights on, All right. Let's do this.
So this report, let me set the report up and you can talk about it. So the report is, if you live single, if you live on your own, and there's a lot of people that choose to do this, there's this concept of the singles tax. So if you're living on your own in an apartment renting, then you're going to spend about $7,500 a year more than if you had a roommate or roommates plural and shared expenses for whatever it might be, certainly the rent, itself, but, your utilities, your internet. I don't think most singles have cable anymore. It's sort of an old person's game, but certainly subscription services and things like that. Talk to me about this phenomenon, Dr. O.
Well, it's really simple, right? It's like rent growth, rents increased a lot in the past couple years during the pandemic. And although rent growth is slow, rents are still roughly 33% higher than they were before the pandemic. And so if you're living alone, right, on a single income, it's hard. It's much harder than it was a few years ago, right? And now, the extra that you're paying for living solo, right, continues to increase. And it's now estimated at $75 or almost $7,600, up from $450.
That's real money. We're talking about post-tax dollars. And so if you're living single and you're just getting started, an extra $7,500, $7,600 a year at your disposal. That could be disposable income or investable income. That's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's worse in big cities like New York, right? New York City is a city. It's a massive job center. It's a city that attracts a lot of young people that are, very often renting first, right? And just trying to make it. They're getting a job in the big city and they're trying to make it. And according to Zillow's, other company, Street Easy, the Zillow New York City website, Street Easy, the singles tax is now $20,000, right? It's Holy just cow. Expensive. It's expensive. And so I guess housing costs rising so fast is definitely an incentive to get married. It's an incentive to get a second paycheck. To help cover the expenses.
Right.
That's the Valentine's Day story this year.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, again, the big cities, those are cities that don't build a lot of housing. New York City, San Francisco, San Jose, Seattle is on that list. Los Angeles. These are cities where the price of housing and rents increases really fast, because the supply side is not able to keep up with the demand for housing. And why is that? It is that case because, well, first they're constrained with land, geographical constraints to building, right? You got a lot of mountains and you got the oceans on each side. And then they also have some of the strictest building regulations, land use rules across the country. And this is well known. And so those markets tend to have lower home ownership rates, right? People tend to rent there for longer. It's much more difficult to move up the housing ladder, in those cities, despite the much higher incomes, that you can command working in one of those cities, you know.
Even on the, well, all right, so let's extrapolate this a little bit. Even if you chose to say, like, live in a, you know, like a city like, you know, Rockford, Illinois, or Erie, Pennsylvania, or, you know, wherever, someplace where the, you know, where rents are more affordable. I mean, you're still subject to this reality that the living alone approach.
Well, absolutely. It makes sense. But that's it. You know, it's always been the case, right? You know, ultimately, I think people get married. Why do people get married? I mean, there are benefits. There are, I love, when I was in grad school, I did a lot of research on marriage and divorce. And it's funny because you can actually quantify the gains from marriage, right? There's a value to being married, whether it's in the labor market, whether it's in the fact that you have somebody to share household duties and household work with. Right. There's a utility, there's a benefit from a gain from being together and maybe even starting a family and having children, right? But there are also these massive financial gains, financial benefits, right? And those financial benefits can also explain why different types of people marry each other, right? So, for example, if you look at the data, you see that, you know, the people with similar education, earning potential tend to marry each other.
Interesting.
And so, like, I think those are little things that are fascinating about the marriage market, that we don't talk about often enough. But yeah, there's what we call positive assortative matching, in the marriage market, where people that are similar, not just in their hobbies and likes, but also in their earning potential.
Yes.
Right? And even their age, tend to get together and become partners and start and decide to and choose to live together. Right. And so there are benefits, and this financial thing, right there is one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts on this. I think it's an interesting story, timely to Valentine's Day or to the Valentine's Day season, which, you know, I celebrate all year round. Valentine's Day, every day is Valentine's Day, as far as I'm concerned. Oh, great to be with you. For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure you listen to Orphe and me every week on the Center Square Radio Hour.